And God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. So this concept of taking dominion over these three areas of land, air, and sea is what we're going to be taking a deep look into today. These are the three jurisdictions that we're ever dealing with in a legal/lawful situation in life. And so to be able to understand what jurisdiction you're dealing in at any given time, and also how to truly take dominion over those three elements that Genesis, where God tells us to in Genesis, is also super important, because if you haven't taken dominion over all three of these jurisdictions in your personal life, then someone's going to be able to take advantage of you sooner or later, and usually sooner, right? Taking dominion over all three of these jurisdictions in your personal life, then someone's going to be able to take advantage of you sooner or later. We see police brutality all the time, and it's like no average person walking down the street could just run up and beat somebody, into submission and get away with it. But when the police officer gets sued, the court always finds them innocent, and no consequences happen to them, because they're like, hey, I'm just a legal fiction. I'm just a police officer. I'm a corporate entity, so I can't really get in trouble. Like with Donald Trump, for example, doesn't have to pay any taxes because Donald Trump doesn't own anything. It's all under his trust. This is what the Rockefellers, Rothschild, everybody who has this kind of wealth is living this way. And it's the little secret you've never been told about finances. You are the living, breathing, flesh and blood divine creation, which is endowed with inalienable rights by the Creator. No one has power or authority over you, but in America and in so many nations around the world is that we forgot who we are, and now we have to wake up to who we are as the living, breathing man or woman, not the all caps name. We did the whole episode talking about God's law being really the backbone of what law is, that it all comes from the Bible and has its roots in Christianity, right? Well, from that perspective, we can see and understand why a trust is so powerful, because a trust is essentially a replica of the Trinity from the concept of Father, Son, Holy Spirit in the Bible.
Yep.
So the way that it's described in the Bible is that the Father would be like the grantor of the trust. So God creates the universe, right? The universe could be seen as God's asset that's held in God's trust under God's law. So God creates the universe, grants it, executes it, right? And then Jesus says that the Holy Spirit is the helper, the comforter, the one who helps lead you and guide you into all truth, is what Jesus says. So the Holy Spirit is like God's trustee, the Spirit of God that watches over the universe and keeps the balance of harmony and equality, right? So Jesus says, when you know the Christ in you, your true self, you will then have a relationship with the Holy Spirit, right? And the Holy Spirit will lead you and guide you. And then Jesus, the Son, would represent God's beneficiary, right? Jesus said, all power in heaven and in earth has been given to me. Why? Because I inherited my Father's nature. So that's what God has granted us. So you and I and every living being are the beneficiaries of God's universe, that God has commanded us to take dominion over it in a healthy way, create balance and harmony and order and all of that. And so a trust is basically a replica of the design of the universe, right? And so it's the most honorable thing one can do to manage the assets of another. It's like an act of honor and service to others. So that's why nobody has a right to sneak their, nose into your business and start infiltrating into your trusts. It's all in the private, unless, of course, you really don't know how to manage it and you manage it unlawfully, then that's the only way you can get in trouble in trust. So it just requires learning some trust law. But I just really like that, Jeremy, of understanding that a trust is kind of like a trinity in the sense that now we understand why we are equally endowed with the same inalienable rights from our Creator because we're all the beneficiary. And God has entrusted us to manage his assets in the right way. And so that's all that a trust is doing from a very simplistic standpoint. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. That's your trust with God. To understand who you are is the basis for all law. Because if you don't know who you are, then the system will tell you who you are. And guess what? Who they say you are is always going to be in their best interest and in your worst interest. So you really want to know who you are. And this is where we get into the birth certificate, the all caps name, the person, the legal fiction. This whole concept is really a status issue that you, as a living, breathing being of flesh and blood, man or woman, we see unfettered tyranny on behalf of the government doing whatever they want, whenever they want. Well, that's because they created a second status, which we have touched on as well, came from the Civil War and freeing the slaves. 14th Amendment introduced this new kind of citizenship, which they called the United States citizen. Well, guess who created the United States citizen status? The government. So if you are a United States citizen, you are a slave or a employee of the United States government corporation. You're not an American national. So every time you go into court, anytime you're in a legal situation, they're automatically assuming that you're under their jurisdiction and that they have power and authority over you. Why? Because you don't know who you are. You've confused yourself with a legal fiction, an all caps entity name, and assumed its status, which is in fact below the government. But you're not that all caps name is the point, right? You are the living, breathing, flesh and blood divine creation, which is endowed with inalienable rights by the Creator. No one has power or authority over breathing, flesh and blood divine creation, which is endowed with inalienable rights by the Creator. No one has power or authority over you. But if you don't know that, if you don't know that freedom is an inner state of being that belongs to you inherently, you might just let people order you around and rule over you. And that is what has happened in America and in so many nations around the world, is that we forgot who we are. We've bought into this illusion of authority, which we're going to go over in next week's episode. And now we have to wake up to who we are as the living, breathing man or woman, not the all caps name. And who owns the title to something? That's the property, right? Your property is what you have title to. And so guess who has your birth certificate? The government. And guess what that birth certificate is in their eyes? It's their title to you as their property. Just like your title of your car is your entitlement, that's your property. So when people wake up to this, they're like, how do I get rid of this birth certificate thing? And what we have to learn is you don't get rid of it because you didn't create it. You find out who you are. And as you said, Jeremy, you start living as who you truly are, because knowledge is real power. And so a judge who's a legal system judge wants to test you out and see if you really know what the hell you're talking about. And so if you just, show up with an affidavit of truth that says, I'm a man, I'm not the all caps name, the judge is going to take that as a kind of challenge, being like, oh, really? I bet I could trick you into saying you are in 10 seconds, and the judge is going to go through the hearing, and everything they're saying to you, it's very deceptive ways of influencing you to agreeing to a verbal contract. So if you don't know how to actually declare who you are, and if it's not just as normal as if somebody was calling me Jeremy in court, I would be like, whoa, hold on there. I'm not Jeremy, I'm Aaron. And I would keep correcting them. As many times as they did it, it would be obvious to me when they were talking to me as a different self. If you can't make that distinction yet as naturally as with your legal fiction name, then you're not ready to go into a court situation yet and try to defend yourself as a man or a woman under common law, right? So this takes a lot of studying and practicing to really know who you are from a lawful perspective and how to articulate that. Because if you don't know how to express your rights, you don't have rights. You need to know your rights. You need to know what the law says. You need to know what real law and equity looks like under common law, such that you can live that way, right? Because this is what happened in the pandemic, was that our rights got trampled over. Yeah. Because we're on the land, we're getting trampled by the legal system because we don't know our rights. So when you walk into a grocery store and they're like, hey, do you have this? Do you have that? Pokey pokey. And you say, no, I don't have to have that to shop here. And they say, oh, yes, you do. This is a private accommodation. And they don't know what they're talking about. But, oh, there's a sign on the door that says there's a mandate. That's all they know. That's all they understand. Well, if you don't understand real law and you know how to actually file notices and claims, letting them know what the law is and what you're going to do, almost nobody knew how to do this before the pandemic began. And now it's really great to see that there's these large communities of law enthusiasts now who have put in procedures where if this happens again, we're going to be ready the next time. We're going to start issuing claims and notices of liability right away. And we're happy to take it to court if we need to, if these businesses don't, remove these tyrannical mandates. So I think if and when we do see another attempt like that to take more of our rights away, we'll see a much better response lawfully. But this has been something we haven't been good at in the past, of knowing who we are and how to express our rights. And that's the land jurisdiction in a nutshell. It's better to control the legal fiction all caps name, not to be the all caps name. You don't want to be it, but you want to be able to control it, because then you can still play in the monopoly world with the legal system.
Yeah.
And that's really what the water jurisdiction is, right? It's the legal system, because the whole legal system, as you've said many times, is based on commercial business. It's all business at the end of the day, because a corporation, remember, which is kind of like a shield for a living man or woman to hide behind. A corporation can't do anything by itself or create anything by itself, right? If you leave the Facebook offices empty, then the business of Facebook basically won't exist anymore. Facebook itself can't just start creating the algorithms or whatever. So living, breathing flesh and blood men and women do everything inside of the veil of corporations, so that there's no liability, so that fraud can be perpetrated, unfettered, so to speak. So this is what has happened especially in America, but Canada, Europe, Australia, we see it all over the world, is that Admiralty Maritime Law has been used and weaponized against the people by, like Jeremy said, basically just tricking everyone into getting into contracts all the time. Because yes, common law establishes all of our rights under God equally and can't be infringed upon. So that's a big hang up for the legal system. The way they get around it is, well, that's okay, because as long as we get you into a contract, a contract kind of nullifies the land jurisdiction. Because my rights are as equal as Jeremy's, but if Jeremy and I want to get into a private contract where I say, hey, I'm going to be your master, you're going to be my servant, you have to serve me 24/7, and hey, Jeremy signed it, he wants to be my servant. Well, now common law can't infringe on our contract and say, well, you're not allowed to be his servant, because it's a contract. So you can do whatever you want under a contract. So in a sense, right, Jeremy, contract law, the water jurisdiction, could almost be said to be the most powerful of the three, because it can be weaponized the easiest of the three. And so you have to have the knowledge of how it really operates to circumvent that weaponization. The United States is a for-profit business operating under contract law. They're not here to help you or be a government to you. They're here to profit from you, because again, and it's funny, Jeremy, how many times we need to hear this before at some point this is going to land and you're going to go, oh my God. But again, it's because they are a for-profit business, not a government. They're doing business right now through the guise of the military industrial complex, through selling weaponry, because they're all invested in the companies that make the weaponry. It's all about business. My people perish for lack of knowledge is what it says. And if you noticed a theme in all three of these jurisdictions, when we've talked about how do we take dominion over the land, air, or water, it's always with knowledge, right? You got to know trust law, you got to know common law, you got to know Admiralty Maritime Law, and then you have to know how to express it, how to behave according to it. That's how you take dominion over any of these jurisdictions of law. And so it's very empowering, right? That all the ability to take dominion is already in my hands, but I have to exercise that dominion and actually do something about it. And I always wonder, Jeremy, if that's not what the baptism ritual sort of represents on a spiritual level. Mm-hmm. If you've been baptized, you put your arms like this, like a corpse in a coffin. They place you under the water, and then they, pronounce you blessed with the Holy Spirit. They pull you out, and now you come out of the water like a dead entity, right? Like a corpse being resurrected. Mm-hmm. And then you walk back onto the land. It's like the reverse of the birth certificate, right? It's like the undoing, sort of, spiritually speaking. Not everybody wants to be responsible. Some people hear this and go, oh, I got to like learn law and like start a trust or whatever. What a drag. And it's like, wow, you don't want freedom bad enough to do that? Mm-hmm. Like you'd rather be a slave than do those things? That's going to be probably the majority of people still. But there is a large majority waking up to these truths and wanting to become the free sovereign being they really are in the 3D world. And it's a really exciting movement that has such powerful spiritual connections. Like you can't get into this, like I said, unless you get the spiritual parallels of it.
100%.
And that's where I get excited to teach this to people, because it becomes another way that we can demonstrate our inner spiritual freedom in a very external way. And what a great catalyst is that? What an amazing opportunity the Creator has given us to say, hey, you know that you are my child, you are sovereign, you are free. I'm going to give you a great opportunity to express that knowing in what we call the legal system, right? Getting free from a matrix that has enslaved you only because you don't know who you are. What an amazing spiritual catalyst. I find it increasingly interesting the more I study it, the more I live it, the more I practice it, the more spiritual it gets. And I think you'll find that there's an incredible purpose for all of us at this current time we live in on our planet, which is under so much tension and strife and corruption. The reason that this knowledge is now really surfacing for humanity is because the divine presence is making it surface. This is, let's say, a collective catalyst that the universe is giving to humanity. Do you want to be free? Are you tired of suffering? If I could find a better way to be of service to the collective than this, I'd be doing that instead. But that is how powerful I believe this conversation we're having today is.